So I'm just going over my process for starting and kind of developing the 600 GPM Darley. So I start off with, of course, the reference. Um, I usually spend a day or two just looking at the reference to see what I actually have to do. This one was very, very detailed. So there was a lot of prep work involved in trying to even figure out how to even tackle this thing. Um, there is a lot of great reference in here. A lot of this stuff is more like a rat's nest, especially these cables here. Uh, what I used to do is I open the tech manual and I find any type of orthographics I can to make the process a lot easier. So in Photoshop, uh, I prepare the orthographics that I find. In this case, I only had a top view and a rear view, which absolutely sucked for this piece of equipment. So everything that was on the left and right sides and the front sides, that was difficult to set up. But at least with the top view, you have an overall size and dimensions and proportion of everything. So you can just fit everything together within the top view. The rear view was helpful for mostly like placement. Because at least if you have a top and in one side view, you're pretty golden, and then everything else can fall into place. So I generally go in here and I put my guides in and I line things up. So I make sure however many reference orthographics I have, I make sure they all line up. And I also make sure that the image is 1-to-1 ratio, meaning it's a perfect square. So I always use 1-to-1 square when doing this because the way you put references in your 3D programs, it usually reacts better than when you have to put it on a square. And going in here, this is my scene I set up in Maya, and I just have two image planes. So I have that rear image, and then I have that top image. Now the problem is I have to start on the frame first, the foundation. That's the most obvious place to start. But the frame is underneath what I can see based on this image. And I also have a kit bash that I brought in from previous files just in case I needed some assets that I already made. So it's good to have a kit bash, even if you didn't make it, just of like, common parts and everything. And generally my kit bash, like it changes throughout the file. So if I find myself using or need to make a specific thing multiple times, I'll just add it to the kit bash area, make sure I UV it. So when I copy it, the UVs are already done. It saves you a lot of time in the end, trust me. So going off next, I'm going to go to the next file in my directory. So on that note as well, I have about 24 different iterations of this file. So every time I get to a new step or whatever, I always iterate. This is pretty common knowledge, just in case you have to go back or you mess something up, because that always happens when you least expect it. So good to have iterations of the file every time you make some progress. So next step, I'm gonna go and kind of view the next file I want to go to. In this case, it's gonna be number 2. So in this one, the frame is pretty much done. Um, Once I got uh, this step here, I started working on the tires. And for the tires, I did something pretty simple. Let me just kind of explain what I did. So if I separate this out, it's just the tire itself, and then the threads are an array that I revolved around it pretty much. So the way I would start is I would start at the very top, and I would make the pieces going all the way across in one direction. So you have your starting array, and then put the pivot point in the center of the tire, and then you're gonna have to play with the rotation amount of how many you want to rotate around it, and then the rotation number. So that's gonna vary depending on the size of this and the actual space you have, but pretty much only making one tread going all the way across the tire, and then doing an array all the way around until it lines up pretty much. So I've used this method that I found from a different artist, and it works pretty well actually. Instead of trying to extrude from the tire itself and doing that way, I like this method better, just in case you have to go back and make edits. It's quick and easy to make edits that way. Also, as far as measurements go, also when I use the reference, I like to get information on the tires themselves. So if I go to my ref board, I actually looked up the tire itself, and it was different variations of it. You can see here the treads are different than the ones that I did. Yeah, so this is what it actually looks like. So I did that. And this is a general tire that's the same measurements. So I use that as a starting point to figure out what size to make the tire to begin with. So I went to the manufacturer's website and got some info, and I got the tire size, and I used that as a basis for the entire thing for like my overall measurements. Because as long as the tires are right, you have a good foundation to start with. So it's always good to start there. So next up, let's open the next file in the series. So here I mainly focus on just getting some of the boxes that are on the sides here. So this one's on the front, and this one is on the left. And again, if I look at the reference from the top view, you can actually see the box here and the box here in the reference. So I have perfect dimensions of what they should be. And it also helps that I also had, the reference itself. There were measurements. So in here, I have a lot of measurements in here. So I cross-referenced that with my actual orthographic, and of course, that's not always going to line up. So you have to kind of get it close enough, but I tried to make it match my actual orthographic more than anything, just because I have the overall blueprint, and this matters more. Is because I have the overall dimensions, they are correct. So everything within it, they can be slightly off and it still all lines up. So next up, let's go further. And this is where I start to get into more of the complex shapes. The cooling unit, cooling assembly. So this big box here that in the end result has a grill on it. So if I go back to the reference, you can kind of see there's a grill here, and there's a grill on the back side. There's a grill on the front. Make this a little bigger so you can see. So my reference board is all over the place, And the reason for that is I constantly change the location of these images throughout the production of this. So they started one way and they ended up this way. Because usually what I'll do is I won't have all the images available on my board. I'll go through and I'll delete what I don't need anymore just to save space, because these PureRef files get massive, and depending on your system specs, it can dramatically slow down. So once this starts to get slow, I just start deleting stuff like immediately. But yeah, here's the front grill here. So initially, I was thinking I was gonna, actually cut out these holes, but then I was thinking I'm gonna save that for texturing because that looks like a cool ass texture. So I wanted to save that for texturing, and it also kind of, saves on geometry as well. So of course I have a few cables in here running there, and so I started to do the cables like, just a little bit at a time. Uh, we got every single piece in here for the water can. And the chains, I did those individual rings, and then I kind of just manually moved them around. I like to, when I do like cables and chains and stuff like this, I like to manually move each link so I can manually set it. Other times I have used like physics simulations to kind of like drape stuff and kind of fold stuff over objects or whatever, but it takes a little time to kind of set up and, put all the colliders in there and then work the physics with it and the collision distance, and then you have to run the sim and then simulate it like over and over again to get it how you want it, or you can just, manually do it. So I chose to manually just do it because that method was faster for me and it was going to be 100% accurate, just because I can manually place each link the way I want them and, have them kind of interchange or whatever. And same thing with like these hoses here. I do a weird way with the hoses, which I will cover later when we get to the cable getting section of this. That's what I like to call it. And of course, this is pretty much symmetrical for at least for the frame anyway. And then some of the pieces here are also symmetrical, so it was pretty much easy to do just one side at a time and just mirror it over, really. So you can kind of see everything's pretty much the same. The only thing that's a little different is the wiring itself, the way it kind of wraps around the frame. It's slightly different depending on which side it's on. So I did take in consideration of that. And this little nest of cables here, that was fun to make. So let me go show you the reference for that if I still have it on this board, because I did spend a considerable amount of time getting that right just because I like the way that kind of flowed or whatnot. Let's see if I even have that on my board. There we go. Yeah. So that's what it looks like, and at least on this side anyway. But I only did one side because you're not going to be seeing both sides at the same time, so you can't really compare them. So doing one and then mirrored it over is perfectly fine. But I did want to, capture the cables, how they're nested and tied together. So that actually worked out pretty well. And usually for my cables, depending on how big they are, I think I only use about 8 sides on this one. Yeah, I only use eight sides on this one. Because this one is, these cables are fairly small. They're not very thick. But when I get to some of the bigger cables, like this one here, let's see, what did I use? I used 12 edges. So it really depends on the actual size of it. Depends on what I use. I try not to go over 12 for cables anyway. Of course, for pipes like this, I think I use 24 edges. Yep, 24 edges. 24 for cylinders is my default, and I go up from there. I don't go below 24 edges. Um, it just makes it simple. It's a good starting point for cylindrical shapes, and you have the ability to make it in quadrants if you use 24. So like here would be one quadrant, this will be another quadrant, quadrant and quadrant. So usually when I model, I'll only do one quadrant at a time for symmetrical shapes like this, and I'll just mirror it over if I have to do like a lot of details in it. But other times, I just kind of model it straight across. So it really depends on the shape. And again, for like things like this, of course, I would only do one side at a time instead of trying to model, both sides at the same time. I would only, let's see. So if I take this shape here, which I did actually weld, so you can kind of see that this is welded to this shape here. So it was Boolean, and then I just kind of weld the edges. And generally, when I do the welds, I like to leave this kind of edge here that's two segments, so that when you kind of look at it, let me turn off my wireframe. It kind of has that shine to it when the light hits it, so it actually gives it a better effect when you look at it. So I have, an edge going all the way around. And I generally do that for pretty much everything. It just looks really well when the light hits it, especially when you texture it, it looks even better. And then when you go to bake it and you make your normal maps on it, it looks even better, especially for hard surface stuff. So like even this beam here, you can kind of see the edges are beveled or chamfered for you Max guys. And that's pretty much everything in here. Kind of has that. This does not, just because this is exactly how it looked in the reference. So the edge here was so tiny that I didn't bother doing it. So moving on to another file. Let's check something else out. Let's go with number 6, which is going to be where I started to do the discharge manifold. Oh boy. Okay, so this was fun to make. So if we kind of look at this, you can kind of see it in the reference here. This was harder to make because we know that this is at an angle. So this orthographic of this is a misrepresentation of the actual volume of this pipe here. So getting this angle, the exact angle right, was only possible with this orthographic from the rear view, just so I can get that exact angle so it actually matches up. And if I go to my reference, take a look at this. Let's find where I did this at. There we go. So there's actually two of these. There's a suction and a discharge one. This one says discharge, so that's the one I use for the major reference. And then the suction one, it goes to this pump volute, which is on the rear of the assembly. And the pipes going off of it are identical, so I was able to kind of do one side and then mirror it over. The only thing that was different was these valve handles and the base of these handles. They were different depending on if it was discharge or suction. So these were very interesting to make. But you can kind of see the breakdown of it. It's a cylinder, a cylinder, and then a box, and then a bunch of boxes. So a lot of these can be broken down into, simplified shapes when you go to start building the pieces. And that's kind of what I did when I was actually making these. So you can kind of see here, this was kind of the start of it, where I have just basic shapes that are here. So if I go into the element, you can kind of see these are separated pieces. They're not actually welded together. But when it, instead of making a Boolean, I also do another thing where I curve the object back down to the surface so that it makes a slope so that it can appear like it's actually attached when it's not. And this also kind of gives you like a cool weld looking effect, like it's actually welded together when it's not. And I have to say, like, modeling this, like, look at the angle on this thing. So what I did to model this and actually put it in this correct position based on how it is in the reference, because you really can't tell what the angle is based on the reference, like any of it really. Even here, that's really kind of hard to see the angle of that, but this was the best view that I could use to get the angle of this box here. So what I had to do was I made an instance of this object and I placed one in the position that it needed to be, and then the other was just, straight up and down, like in front. So I would have it right in front and just, I would do all the modeling there, and then it would update here in place, which worked out great. So another way I could have did that is I put a locator or a point helper in the exact position that I need it to be. And then I can animate just the object state from the state that it needs to be to the state where I'm actually modeling it from, and then just kind of go back and forth from there. So, I mean, there's multiple ways you can kind of tackle it, but I ended up just making an instance of this object. Actually, I made a proxy. So I put just a box here just to get the volume and the angle of where it needed to be. And then I modeled it straight up and down. And then once I got done with the model, I basically just made it go to the location it needed to go. So another thing that I really like with Maya specifically is, let's say I needed to take one of these objects that I made and I need to, attach it to a surface. And it's like a weird angle too. So if I wanted to, like, let's say put a nut on this surface here and have it like that, be that position or whatever. So let me grab this right here real quick. And I'm just gonna just move it a little closer so we can kind of see. And I'll just grab all of this, not that, and this, so we kind of clear the view a little bit. Cool thing I can do is I can go into modify and do snap together tool, and I can click on the surface here. You can see that it's based on the normal, so it's facing straight up. And then I can go to this weird surface and tell it to connect to here, right? And when I hit enter, it's in the right rotation. So it's on the right location based on the axis that it's on. And that is super helpful. So I just want to show you that. So next up, open scene. Let's go to the engine block. So this is where it started to get really tricky, and I had to do some mental gymnastics, I kid you not, to figure out the placement and proportions of this stuff here, because I do not have this in the orthographic. So if I look down here, there's a there's another large container here that I make in another file, but I started to block out where this engine is. And if I go to my reference, where's my reference? Okay, there we go. Oh, it's chugging. It's chugging. So it's either trying to save or it's frozen on me. Don't know which is what. Gonna pause the video right quick. Alright, so PureRef, I had to close it and restart it, but it's back up. So the only thing I had for doing this massive engine was an orthographic, well, no, 3/4 shot here, and this one is a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. But of course, you cannot get any type of perspective or placement of any of these from this angle and try to put this in a 3D space. And this is also the other angle I had, and that's it. So, and then from the actual orthographics I have, you cannot see the engine at all in either view. So building this engine was the hardest thing I've had to do here, just because it was a bunch of fuck around to find out, to be honest. Just moving things around. There was like adjustments like all the time. So I started with a block out just to kind of get the volume of it. So I made like these really basic shapes. Yeah, made some really basic shapes just to kind of get it started. Because what I had to do was, because I had basically no information visual that I could use to identify the placement of anything on the engine, I had to build everything around it first. That was the only way this was going to get accomplished. So I could see everything else around it here on the orthographic here. So that's mainly where I focused, was everything else but the engine. The engine was the very last thing I did. So this one's the pump volute, and I just started making that. And also, I actually extruded up one of the labels. So I believe what I did was I took one of the labels and I just kind of imported it in as an image, and then I just traced over the surface of it just to get the shape of it, and then extruded it up. And then I plopped it on the side here just because that's actually how it looks in the model itself, and actually kind of gives a really cool effect. And again, you can kind of see where I had to fit different objects together. So you can kind of see there's a cylinder here, and then this is a box with rounded edges, and another cylinder on top, and all that kind of got boolean together. And then I go around the edges and I clean those up and make one long bevel. And for this object, I did 3 edges. So I did the 3-edge bevel in this case just because it needed to look smooth. So that's kind of the effect it gets on the surface, and I like the way that came out. And again, my kit bash over here got a little bigger, so you can see there's a little bit more objects here that I kind of either brought in from other scenes, or I started in this scene and then I kind of poured it over. So right here you see there's a wing nut, and if I go and look, the UV's already done for that, just so that when I have to place it somewhere else, I don't have to worry about that at the end. I can just, do the layout and not have the UV, like simple things that, get duplicated like 50 times across the model. because that's not fun, especially for these rivets on the side here. They're basically all the same shape, and luckily, I believe with this I can get away with just making it that, and that works out perfectly fine just because it's a small object. And same thing here. I got all these pieces in here. This one is, oh yeah, this is way bigger. Okay, so I got a lot of little individual pieces in here. I think that might also be in my kit bash. And then I got these cotter pins in here that I folded over, which I brought in from the kit bash and just kind of made it specific to the scene. More chains. These were slightly different than the rest of them. And then you have this bar here. And then this is like an extra leg that kind of swings down. So kind of like a little extra kickstand. And then, of course, the wheel on the front. So this was modeled based on, I think, the placement. Yeah, the placement of the rear orthographic. So I did it just so I can get the size right. And then I believe in a later iteration of the file, I actually moved this down so that it would touch the floor and line up with the wheels, so it would be, stable. And more piping here. This section was interesting. I did have really good reference of this as far as pictures go, I believe. Yeah, this section here. So yeah, I had really good reference of this, just kind of like the overall of this, but the specific shapes that you couldn't see from the opposite side, I just had to kind of figure that out. And then you can kind of see like this kind of comes down at an angle. It is not straight up and down. So there's like a lot of very specific, unique shapes in this model that I had to build. So a lot of the geometry I could not reuse, except of course like nuts and bolts. They're always going to be the same, but the actual shapes that these plug into, like everything on this was unique, like very unique. So it made the process a little slower, and then of course doing a ton of adjusting the entire time. This piece here, I was able to steal this from another model that I did on the pump rack module, so that was easy to kind of adjust and make work for this one. And also this shape, like I did bring this in from another file that I made, and I had to make adjustments and make it look how it looks here. But some of these, they are reused from other scenes, so that actually did save a little time. And next up, so this is file number 8. Next one I want to go to is let's jump down to 12. So we show more of how I blocked out the engine. All right, so now the engine has a lot more shapes on it, but you can see that it's still very much a block out. And I just started to detail certain things around it that I could see. So this piece here connects to the pump volute that's in front of it here. So that got finished and detailed out. And then of course, I have these pump assemblies for the discharge and the suction. Those got finished out, complete with chains and caps and arms. So you notice that like this side is different from this side. But mainly this piece here was identical to this piece here. So that actually worked out. But the only thing I really had to change was the front of these. They were different depending on the suction and discharge side. And then of course I started adding a few cables here and there. Mainly what I did here was like I wanted to go through and make the connection points for the cables and worry about how the cables wrap around each other later. So you can kind of see if you look at this here and this here, this would be a to and from for the cable. And I kind of did that in a lot of places around the model as I was setting this up. Just so when I get to start connecting them, it would be easier because I knew that trying to trace the wiring for everything on here, which I actually did painstakingly, was probably going to be the last step because I needed to build everything else around it first and worry about the cabling later. And oh my God, these pieces here. I think I've moved these 3 cylinders about 50 times throughout the whole process just because the scale and the placement is just every time I would build more parts around it, I would see more and more things that I needed to change with it. So again, this part of the engine where you have the belt in the front and the fan, well, that was very difficult to do, mainly because you have these points here that are along the belt, these cylinders here, and I really didn't have good reference of this. Let me show you what I had. So if I go and look at this, I pretty much had, see if I can find it. Yeah, this. So I had to do mental gymnastics to try to, place this in perspective based on this image. So that was very difficult. Very difficult. So a lot of trial and error going on there to try to get, the actual placement of this. Like I even tried doing some weird thing where I would make a plane and I would put this image on it and then I would overlay that over the viewport and try to match that up from this angle exactly how it was on mine, just so I could place it from this perspective inside of my scene. And that kind of worked. Kind of. It was helpful, but ultimately it was all wrong, ultimately. And I had to, change it multiple times. But yeah, that's all I had to go off of. That's just that. That's it. And translate it into this. Of course, if I hide the fan, you kind of see it better. Yeah, translate it into this. So yeah, this is really hard to set that up. But once I got the placement of everything that I thought was correct, that's when I went back and I fed the belt around it. So I pretty much just did a plane all the way across and just connected it, manually extruded it out, and then just gave it some thickness pretty much. So pretty straightforward. And let's go to the next file. Open scene. Next one I want to jump to is where I started to detail a little bit more. All right, so here I started to get into more of the detailing, and you can kind of see there's more cables there now. And this big thing is here. I think this is a fuel tank. And finally, the control box, the star here. Let me turn on wireframe so you can kind of see. Yeah, so made the control box in here, and this is where I started to build all the wiring that's underneath here. Oh boy. Yeah, I did get some good reference of these, thankfully. Just as far as wiring goes, I knew that they needed to connect to the fuel lines here. At least some of them do. And then some of these started to connect to these. So yeah, this is around the time where, like, you know, these are pretty much in the right spot, pretty much close enough. But it's really hard to go off of that from, just a few scatter images here and there. And all these images are from, different angles here and there. And then I have another variation of that too here. I actually found a bunch of reference online on my own. I just kind of Googled the 600 GPM Darley, and there was a place that was selling these for like $2,000, and they had like a huge image gallery they took. I was like, cool, extra reference. And what's great about it is this was like a different like color variation of it. So like you kind of see these cylinders here, they're like painted over, but in the one that we took for here, they're not. So these have more detail on them. But remember that part I was saying about the engine where I couldn't really, tell what I was looking at based on one angle? Yeah, check this out. Top view of that. So this would have been helpful when I was doing that, but I found this after I was already done. I was like, okay, that checks out. So yeah, top view of that. Just giving me a general idea of how everything is placed and whatnot. So yeah, it's kind of cool to, find actual good reference online randomly that we didn't reference gather ourselves. So that actually worked out. Uh, the one that they had, like the the leg on the front was just like straight up broken. So that was kind of hilarious. Oh yeah, I think it was Government Planet was the website or whatever. But yeah, they had some good like extra images in here that I actually did use throughout my production once I found this. And yeah, this was like the best thing I found, just so I could see how this lit up. And then the front display here, I was able just to pull a texture right off of that. So that worked out good. So again, I started, detailing things here and there. And this piece here, this was like the hub, like a wiring hub that kind of all the cables were like just spruing from. So I had to get the placement of that like correct, and then this was kind of like a little ring that a lot of the wiring went through and down. So like, yeah, and you can kind of see like my block out here, like this piece here and this piece here. This is kind of how I blocked out the hoses. You kind of see here. Yeah, so I started putting cylinders just to kind of floating off in weird places based on the reference I had. And then I started to detail all this stuff in here. This piece was interesting. Check this out. So this was a lot of booleans. Yeah, just a bunch of cylinders. This one took a while to build just because it was so unique, very unique. I mean, look at this. So I made sure I went and actually did the boolean, connected everything, and of course do the little bevel on where it's boolean, so it gives it that nice sheen when you look at it without wireframe. So yeah, look at that. Kind of gives you that nice curve around where it's boolean across, where connection points are and everything. So I like to have that cool look, especially for hard surface stuff. It looks really good, especially when you bake the curvature map for that. It's just gonna look really good. But yeah, this was interesting because I had to manually kind of connect all this stuff. I think I ran like a box like straight through and just actually no, probably not. I probably just boolean all the cylinders here and just kind of bridge them, and then made the connections, and then of course did the bevel last. But yeah, this one it required some extra attention just because it's such a unique shape, and it's like a hub for a lot of different pieces that connect to it. A lot of the there's some cables going up in here, and then you got some the piping and everything. And then you got this little cool little shape that I duplicated the hell out of all around the model. Um, and then this very unique cap here. I forgot what this was. I think this was like for, I think it was fuel. I really couldn't tell. Yeah, because you really couldn't tell from this image what it was. But I found something in the manual that actually had, I think, the image on top of it. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. I don't think I actually did that in the final, just because I wanted to capture the weathering of this. I actually kind of like how this look. This cap I kind of like this stair steppy effect that this has. So did that too here. Of course, you can see this has a lot of points. Yeah, a lot of segments. Let me see how many segments this thing actually has. I'm actually curious. So yeah, there's obviously a much faster way of doing this, but I'm just kind of doing it this way, just really quickly. Oh, missed two. Okay, so damn, 126 edges. Yikes. But it was necessary to kind of get, all the points along the outside here. So yeah, worth it. I probably could have reduced the poly count here, but it doesn't matter. It looks great. This is fine. Looks good as is. So I wanted to capture that shape as is. And then we had these little nests. I don't even they're like sleeves or whatever. Let me go back to the reference. Yeah, they're like these little sleeves that kind of go in and out. They feed all the wiring into them, and then they come out in different locations all around the model. And there's different types of cables that even come out of them. Like some are like these weird twisty looking things, and then some are just the straight cables that come out. But yeah, they had these sleeves everywhere. And then this shape here, oh man, yeah, this shape was interesting to make. So this was a lot of different like booleans here and there, and I tried to weld as much of this together to get this look. And then of course I had to do the inside of this in here. So yeah, this got really tricky. Like I said, this thing had some really unique shapes on it. Like, hot damn, look at this thing. What even is this? And then I had to make another variant where it's basically just, flip the other direction. And then I started blocking out how the cabling comes off of that. And of course you got these little brackets here that kind of hold the sleeves together. These are like all around the model. Actually, I use this a lot, especially on the frame. There was a lot of pieces on the frame. You'll see later when I go back and do the wiring for the frame itself. I thought I already did that, but I think I have it turned off in here. Yeah, it might be turned off. Yeah, there we go. Line holders. That's what I call them, because I don't know what the name are. But yeah, I made a bunch of these, and I just kind of duplicated them all around the model. And these are kind of how the cables are fed across and around the model. And here's the actual cabling for that. So if I look and just maybe hide everything else, there we go. So you can kind of see I made a whole bunch of these line holders, and then the lines go through them or whatever. And then they kind of splinter off into different sections, and they all wrap underneath and around. And I traced all of that. Holy crap. At least the reference was good enough that I could trace it. Because these were very, very they traveled long distances. I think the only one I had trouble with was this section here because the reference was iffy. So I couldn't trace exactly where this one went. So this one kind of terminates right into the side here. I never found where this actually connects. Um, Shh, don't tell anybody. Then we got this little strap here on the front. This was actually pretty cool to make because this has a lot of different shapes in here. And then you have the zip ties, of course. And then like the little buckle underneath. So yeah, it's a lot of detail in here. And let's go back up to the top actually. Started to get more detail in here for the intake and the coolant assembly. These different pipes coming off, and then the connections they have. They all had this little kind of like a brace. They all had like different types of braces here. And most of the time I could reuse them around the model. So again, I did the UVs for these, and then I kind of just duplicated the hell out of them. And some of them, they were different sizes, and I had to, resize a few things here and there, and maybe rotate a few of them. And some of them were kind of unique. But yeah, there was a lot of brackets around here. And yeah, this part here. Woo! Okay, so this took a while to get right. Many iterations just because of all the reference I had was like, from either extreme angles or not the exact angle I needed just to figure out how I needed to go in and build certain things, and then how all this stuff connects back into the engine block itself. Yeah, this was real tricky. Real tricky. All these very unique shapes here, like this thing here. Like, what is that? It's a cool little hub there. Has a lot of pieces in here, a lot of booleans. Yeah, this was kind of a nightmare to make as well because I had to change this several times because every time, I started building stuff around it, I was like, oh, I got to adjust that now. And yeah, this was kind of like the outer kind of cage where the engine kind of like moves into. So this was like a really weird kind of cutout shape that I had to make to wrap basically around the engine where the parts interpenetrate through this piece. So that was fun to make. Yeah, look at this. A lot of booleans there. Some of these are just straight cylinders I just kind of slap right on. I don't even think this is connected. Yeah, that's not even connected. Look at that. Look at that. It's just on the surface. I ain't even cut out the back of that. Damn. Shame on me. Maybe I did it in a later file. I don't know. Not gonna be too hard on myself. But yeah, a lot of pieces in here. Oof. Look at that. Very unique shapes. Very unique shapes. All around here. Everything. Everything is just like a new shape to begin with. And then you got all these things that are connecting and just coming off of different things out here and overlapping. Man, the overlap is just crazy on this model. Like, now that I'm going back and kind of explaining this, like, I'm trying to wrap my head around how I even accomplished this. And I was under like extreme crunch too. So I was trying to, model as fast as I could when I was making all this stuff. So yeah, and here I kind of make some connection pieces that are kind of, cut out in the place where it penetrates with like this piece here. So a lot of this stuff is just kind of like blocking, and then I go and like I start detailing it. Then we got some Mickey Mouse ears here or whatever. And all these little shapes coming off the side of here. Got this fin coming off this little engine part here. So yeah, this mostly just detailing and going through and just grabbing things here and there. Let me go to the next file.
Let's see what we got. See what we got. For the next file, let's go. We're on 12 now. Let's go to 16. So in here, even more detail. Yikes. So yeah, you can see I was putting in more work on the cabling. There's a lot going on here. Yeah, look at all these little pieces in here, man. This is just crazy. So I had to try to get that little twisty effect with the cabling. So I did some weird like twisty with the cylinders, so it would kind of give it that illusion that it's like that twisted shape. Yeah, there you go. So and it actually worked out really well with the texturing as well. Um, but again, just kind of going in here and doing all the little details, connecting all the piping. So all this connects back to the engine block, and it comes up off of this little hub here I made that was super detailed. And you got wires and cables just like, where's this even going? Oh, let's go into the bottom of that. And you got like these wires here to just kind of wrap around. And this was kind of set up to go in a different direction. Oh, here we go. There's that little that wiring hub that I was talking about earlier, where all the wires kind of like feed into. And you kind of see like I started making the cylinders in here, just kind of blocking out just the shapes of where the wires would be heading to. Um, More detailing here. I think this was like another shape that the wires fed into or from. And then even these got more detail. Look at that. Yeah, I like that right there. So got a little cog in there. Um, this got more detailed. Yeah, this shape was very interesting to make. Let's see, where even is this? So this is kind of like a bunch of pieces here and there, just kind of moved around. I did like a rotation just to kind of get this to even be useful looking. And then, of course, there's shapes in here that are not Boolean yet. I think I Boolean them later on, or maybe I don't remember, because there's so many of these unique little tiny pieces that I had to make on this model that really kind of hard to keep track of stuff. I'm pretty sure I missed some stuff on this, but nobody will ever know. And we got some of the cabling kind of coming off the side here. Yeah, this was the cabling that was going to that box that was on the front. Yeah, this was the, what was it, the fuel tank that was here. So like as I was going, going back and forth, you can kind of see my my hierarchy here is a complete disaster. And it was like this for most of the time. Most of the time, it was just kind of all over the place because I was trying to model as much as I can as fast as possible. So hierarchy over here, completely out the window. Didn't pay any attention to it. Didn't care. Not until the end anyway. But yeah, just had to go through, make as much as I can, keep going, pressing on, do cleanup here and there. Let's go into the next file where it makes some more progress. So that was 16. Let's jump to 20. Yeah, so this is where I started, the cable getting is what I like to call it. Where I was going through and making all the freaking wiring for this. Oh my god, look at all these damn wires. Look at that. We got wires coming out of wires, man. Look at this. This is wireception. But yeah, I had a bunch of wiring in here, just everywhere. Just different types of wires, different shapes, different sizes, different segmentations, different angles. Like, look at all this crap. Yeah, look at this. Wires coming out of wires. Like, look at that. All of that. So yeah, this stuff got crazy, man. It got crazy. And then you got like the cable straps in here. And you got all this. Look at that. Look at that. Wires everywhere. I can't believe I did this. Actually, let me go back a step. Let me see. That was 20. Let's go to 18 maybe. Cause I don't even want to see when I started like building the Yeah. So let me go look over here. So you can kind of see. Let me turn off wireframe. Yeah. The wiring here just kind of started getting real crazy, especially around here. Let me even go back one more step. So that was 18. What did we stop off? 17? Just want to see. I think it was file 17. Yeah, because I had just finished doing these little sleeves that kind of connect into this side over here. And then I started running the wires from this little hub here, and they had to run down and wrap all through here, and then they had to wrap through each other. And then you can kind of see where I was staging some of the wires where I couldn't figure out at first, and there's another one where I was staging wires. So yeah, on that note, let me show you how I did the wiring. So I would kind of start off with a cylinder. Let me just kind of put it into position. Just kind of move it over here or whatever. And it's 24 edges. Let me just kind of scale this down a little bit. And we're just going to go through and remove the top and bottom. So I have my starting point. Let me squash this down and delete history. All right, so I would have like a piece like this, and I would find like where it's connecting from. So I would put it, somewhere over here, and then I would move it somewhere like over here, kind of rotate it around. And let's say I wanted to go over here like that. And then once I had like all the what I call steps for every single point where I wanted it to kind of go around, I would just kind of combine it all together, and I would bridge in between the points. So if I took this and just bridge this together like that, and then I would use a curve so it would kind of curve around or whatever. And of course I could change like the shape and like the direction of the curve or whatever. But yeah, that's mainly what I did. I just put the steps in here and just kind of bridged everything together like so. And I pretty much did that for every single cable, all of them. And the reason I did it like that was when I started like an array like this, where I have multiple cables kind of going intertwined with each other, I would put the connection points here where they would start to wrap, and then where they would put a point here, and then a point here where they coming from. And then it's easier just to kind of visualize all of them together all at once, and then just kind of bridge them together really quickly. So you can get like an overall view of everything. I found this to be very useful, very useful. So that's mainly how I did all the cabling in a nutshell. So let's jump to my very last step, actually. Don't save. And this step, obviously, I did scene cleanup. So you can kind of see everything is actually grouped together by assembly or by section that I wanted to unwrap together. And I color coded everything. And this also corresponds to the texture set that I wanted to assign it to, and also the material. So I could see visually. Let's see if I go into my material editor. You can see like I have all the different colors in here. And let's just take a look at engine assembly A and engine assembly B. So if I go and kind of take a look at that, I'll just select both of these and isolate them. Oh wait, no, that's cable guide. Nope, wrong one. Engine A and B, there we go. That's what I meant to select. Yeah, so different colors. So it's easy to kind of visualize this. And then of course, if I go to here, you can kind of see, I stacked the UVs based on the group itself, the material itself. So it all kind of visually flows together. But yeah, this is kind of the UVs on it. They're all pretty much stacked together. I probably could have did a better job with this because this is kind of a curved shape, and I probably should have, straightened that out like this, that's right next to it. So yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to do this. Like I said, I was on a crunch, so I was trying to, do this really fast, really fast. Yeah, going back in here, everything's color coded. Just makes it super easy when you actually export this out and go to Substance Painter, and everything comes in and everything's named the exact same. So I name my materials and my groups the exact same thing, just so it's all one-to-one and easy to visualize because of the colors, and it's also the same name when it comes in for the material and the texture set. So this all kind of flows together, and it's pretty to look at when you're looking at it in the viewport, the different colors. And that's about it for modeling. In the next video, I'll go over texturing.